Completing a cemetery provides you access to the altar of the Weaver, where you can place your woven echoes. Woven echoes are a new, itemized type of echo that bring unique challenges and rewards. After completing your first cemetery, you will be taken to the Haven of Silk, the hub for the Woven faction. When you are first brought to the Haven of Silk, you will be introduced to Mask, who will invite you to join the Woven, a faction made up of worshippers of the Weaver. You will gain reputation points with the Woven by earning and spending memory amber, a new currency mostly found in tombs and cemeteries, and by slaying Woven enemies. With each rank, Mask will sell you new Woven echoes. You can purchase these Woven echoes with memory amber. By completing Woven echoes and advancing your ranks with the Woven, you will gain points for the Weaver tree, which allows you to influence the Monolith of Fate. The Weaver tree functions similarly to passive and skill trees, but instead modifies your Monolith of Fate. Travelers will be able to gain a maximum of 50 Weaver tree points, and as mentioned above, you will gain points by increasing your rank with the Woven and completing Woven echoes for the first time. There are roughly 70 nodes in the Weaver tree, which offer different ways to adjust your Monolith of Fate. Some examples: place an item to imprint it in a slot to have a chance for similar items to be granted as an extra reward when completing echoes. Gain a chance for beacons to be replaced by more difficult super beacons that reveal more echoes on completion. Gain a chance for Xeric to join you in your echoes with a big boost to gold drops. Convert arena echoes to super arena echoes. Remove arena echoes from spawning. When Weavers will items drop, they roll their Weavers will value twice and keep the higher amount. Increase the amount of memory amber drops. Gain a chance for your tombs and cemeteries to have a possessed nemesis in them. Nemesis always drop their specific weapon item subtypes when they escape after empowering them. Shade of Oribus may ambush you in your echoes. Remove corruption gain when slaying the Shade of Oribus. Replace common echo rewards such as glyphs, runes, and gold with a different random reward. Add new echo reward types, such as memory amber, woven echoes, and dungeon keys and charms. There are 36 different woven echoes coming with the release of Season 2. Woven echoes are items that can be found in tombs and cemeteries, can be purchased from the NPC Mask, or generated in the echo web through certain nodes on the Weaver's tree. You will unlock new woven echoes that you can purchase from Mask as you advance in the ranks in the Woven. However, not all woven echoes are purchasable. Woven echoes items specify their type on their tooltip as a crafting woven echo, boss woven echo, or woven echo. Woven echoes containing endgame bosses and crafting rewards are signified with icons inside the Woven Echoes tab. Woven echoes with a plus icon in the Woven Echo tab indicate that completing that woven echo will grant you a Weaver tree point. Woven echoes can be added to your echo web via the altar of the Weaver after you kill a cemetery boss. Once they are added, you can play them like you would a normal echo. In a party, players may each add woven echoes into their own individual timelines. Woven echo drops are signified by a teal-on gold item label and are shown on the minimap. Some woven echoes feature completely new endgame bosses, such as the Droll Queen or Ignixiros the Antipode Dragon. Others feature endgame enhanced versions of existing mini-boss and boss encounters, such as Haruspex Orion, Majesa, and an Uber version of Aberoth. Other woven echoes provide unique challenges and rewards not found in normal echoes. Some rewards even affect other nearby unconquered echoes. Example rewards found in woven echoes: new endgame crafting options, set item crafting. Shatter set items into set shards and apply them like normal affixes to make an item count towards that set bonus. There is a new specific affix shard for every set item. Reroll legendary potential. Rerolls the legendary potential of uniques that have at least one legendary potential. Attribute swap. Swap an item's attribute, strength, intelligence, attunement, dexterity, for another selected attribute. Reroll unique or set item mod values. Reroll mod and implicit values of unique and set items by sacrificing another of the same type with at least equal power level. Woven Echo Exchange. Sacrifice 3 woven echoes to gain a random one. Corruption catch-up for alt characters. Adding a new enemy to your possible nemesis encounters. Void Nemesis. Guaranteed unique drops. Class-specific gear. Conquering a woven echo for the first time usually grants at least one Weaver tree point. The points are shared with all characters sharing the same stash. 13 points can be earned from Weaver faction ranks, and the remaining 37 points from conquering woven echoes. Threshold of Eternity, Uber Aberoth, is an exception and grants no Weaver tree points. Woven echoes auto-store to their new inventory tab upon pickup. This can be toggled off from the game settings. At the end of tombs and cemeteries will be a woven enchanter device, which can be used to enchant your class-specific idols. Adorned, grand, huge, large, ornate. Enchanting an idol will grant one enchanted affix and turn the idol into a heretical idol of the same subtype of that idol type. Enchanting an idol adds an enchanted affix up to tier 4 and some amount of Weaver's Touch, where the combined amount of tiers on the enchanted affix and Weaver's Touch is between 5 and 14. For example, it could add a tier 1 enchanted affix and 4 Weaver's Touch, or up to tier 4 enchanted affix and 10 Weaver's Touch. Similar to Weaver's Will items, when you have a heretical idol equipped and slay an enemy, you will have a chance to either increase the tier of an enchanted affix or add a new one and expend Weaver's Touch. Enchanted idols can have up to 2 enchanted affixes in addition to the 2 standard affixes they normally have. Idols can be re-enchanted for a memory amber cost, which removes any existing enchanted affixes or Weaver's Touch before enchanting it again, adding an enchanted affix and Weaver's Touch. The new Rune of Weaving, added this patch, can be used to consume Weaver's Touch like it can for Weaver's Will. The Woven Enchanter has a limited number of uses based on its location. 1 use in a Tomb of the Erased. 2 uses in Cemeteries of the Erased and the Cemetery of Reweaving Woven Echo. 3 uses in the Sepulchre of the Lost Woven Echo. 4 uses in the Cenotaph of Worlds Woven Echo. If you are in a party, each player can use the Woven Enchanter device independently. Set items can now be shattered at the Forge of Shattering in the Great Bridge Woven Echo. This yields shards specific to that set item, which can be crafted onto other items, making them into reforged set items. This makes them count as that set item towards the set bonus of that set. Set shards and shattering. There are set shards and new affixes for every set item that has been added, 1 per set item. All set affixes are named for their set item and end with the word reforged. Shattering set items drops 1 to 4 matching shards per item shattered. Set shards cannot drop naturally. They can only be created by shattering matching set items. Each use of the Forge of Shattering will shatter all items placed inside and expend 1 use. If you are in a party, each player can use the Forge of Shattering independently. Reforged set items. Crafting a set affix onto an item reforges it and turns it into a reforged set item, but it can still be crafted. Reforged set items will be considered a matching item for the corresponding set and count toward the set bonus. Reforged set items will be named after their set item with reforged appended to it, e.g. Zarek's Ambition Reforged. Because reforged set items are considered set items, they will follow the same loot filter and tab priority rules as set items. Crafting. Reforged set shards can be used to craft items in the forge. Reforged set shards can only be crafted on the same item type as their set item but can use any base of that type. For example, Invoker's Static Touch Reforged can only be crafted on rings, but it could be crafted on an opal ring or a sapphire ring. An item can only have 1 type of set affix at a time. Each set affix provides 2 stats based on the original set item. Set items still cannot be shattered by the Rune of Shattering or removed with the Rune of Removal to gain shards. Only by the new Forge of Shattering in the Great Bridge Woven Echo. However, reforged set items can be shattered. Set affixes can be sealed with the Glyph of Despair. Set affixes cannot be granted through the use of Glyph of Chaos, Glyph of Envy, Rune of Redemption, Rune of Discovery, or Weaver Tree Imprinting. Set affixes can be crafted normally up to T5, as usual. Using the new Rune of Havoc, which shuffles all affix tiers within an item except sealed affixes, you can potentially get T6 and T7 as well. You can use the transmuting gem in the far side turtle woven echo to re-roll the legendary potential of all items placed into it. Re-rolled items will either improve or lose their existing legendary potential. If you use the transmuting gem and legendary potential is lost, you will receive a number of random rare affix shards equal to the legendary potential lost. Only legendary potential is re-rolled, not implicits or unique modifiers. If you are in a party, each player can use the transmuting gem independently. Note, if you lose all legendary potential on the item, it can then be used to replace the Egg of the Forgotten in a Nemesis encounter, giving you another chance to give a unique item high legendary potential or turn it into a useful legendary item. In the Gauntlet of Strife Woven Echo, you'll be challenged by a sequence of boss encounters, and by completing it, you'll be rewarded with access to the sacrificial altar, which can be used to sacrifice a unique, legendary Weaver's Will, or set item to re-roll the all affix values of a matching item. The item being sacrificed needs to have equal or greater potential tier. Potential tier is equivalent to Weaver's Will item. Weaver's Will plus the sum of legendary affix tiers. Other legendary item. Number of legendary affixes. Unique item. Legendary potential. Set item. 0 if you are in a party. Each player can use the sacrificial altar independently. Use the Relic of the Observer in Erden's Watch to replace a non-sealed attribute affix with a different attribute of your choosing. Plus all attributes and plus vitality cannot be replaced or chosen. Sealed affixes cannot be replaced. The tier and roll range of the replaced affix will be preserved for the new affix. If you are in a party, each player can use the Relic of the Observer independently. Experimental item crafting is now done exclusively by using the thaumaturgy device in the Rune Prison Complex to replace a prefix with an experimental affix on boots, gloves, or a belt. This change makes this itemization more approachable. Must have 2 prefixes and not have an experimental affix. The chance of higher tier outcomes increases with the combined prefix tiers. Exalted prefixes tiers contribute much more increase to the chance for higher tier outcomes. Max tier outcome is 5, but a Rune of Havoc can be used to swap an exalted tier onto the experimental affix you added. If you are in a party, each player can use the thaumaturgy device independently. With the addition of the thaumaturgy device, we have removed the glyph of insight and Rune of Research from the game. Developer note and clarification regarding previously given incorrect information. Rune of Research was previously guaranteed, and the only way to seal an experimental affix. Experimental affixes cannot be obtained as shards, which means that experimental affixes are no longer able to be sealed. We felt this a safe trade-off for the ability to more easily target experimental affixes on good item bases and the ability to increase them to higher tiers using Rune of Havoc. 3 new runes have been added for Season 2. Rune of Havoc shuffles the tiers of affixes on an exalted item. The rolls of the affixes within their tiers are preserved regardless of whether their tiers change. For example, an item with Tier 2 Strength, Tier 7 Dexterity, Tier 3 Health, and Tier 2 Endurance might be changed to have Tier 7 Strength, Tier 3 Dexterity, Tier 2 Health, and Tier 2 Endurance. This cannot result in all the affixes having the same tiers as before, guaranteeing at least one change in tier. And it cannot be used on items where all non-sealed affixes have the same tier, to prevent wasting the rune. Sealed affixes are unaffected and are not shuffled. Rune of Redemption randomly changes the exalted affixes, T6 and T7, on an item into different affixes. It does not change the tiers of the affixes or the rolls within the tiers. Affixes can only be changed to ones that can spawn on this item type when dropped from a regular enemy. Sealed affixes are unaffected. Rune of Weaving converts a random amount of the remaining Weaver's Will or Weaver's Touch on an item into additional affixes or affix tiers, as if you had slain many enemies with that item equipped. At Temporal Sanctum Tier 2 and above, you can now select one affix from your exalted item to guarantee it is included on your resulting legendary item when sealing the Eternity Cache. Or you can opt to let the Wings of Fate decide if that's more your style. Added a small chance for a critical success that can cause the unique item to take more affixes than its legendary potential. This chance scales with the chance for that unique to drop with higher legendary potential. For example, if you're using a calamity with 1 legendary potential, the chance for critical success depends on the chance of a calamity dropping with 2 or more legendary potential at level 100. Added a new class of enemy, champion, to the game. Champions are a subset of rare enemies, with unique names and more powerful abilities. 20 champion enemies have been added for Season 2 across the game. Champions will be larger than other enemies and have an orange highlight to distinguish themselves as a champion enemy. Champions are based on existing enemies but have added and altered abilities. Each champion has 3 random mods, a prefix and suffix like other rare enemies, and a new champion mod that grants it an extra ability. Champions can spawn in the campaign, in dungeons, and the mine, but they only spawn in areas of level 6 and above. Champions also always drop an item with a sealed champion affix that depends on the champion's mod. For example, a Volcano champion will always drop a belt with their Volcano champion's affix. Champion affixes are a subtype of personal affixes and, as such, cannot exist as shards. Items with champion affixes are always rare or exalted. Examples: +1 maximum companions and increased minion damage. Chance to cast Electrify on hit and chance to cast Smite on hit with throwing attacks. Up to 10 times per 2 seconds.
Arena echoes have fewer waves overall and provide better rewards. Most enemies in the arena now move faster when they are further away from the player, allowing them to engage with the player faster. A random champion now spawns at the end of the arena's last wave. Enemies spawn faster. Fix the minimap not generating in some arena echoes. Fix the wave count not showing. Spire changes. In Spire Objective Echoes, all spires will now spawn with a Spire Guardian. Spire Guardians are special minibuses that guard the spires in their echoes. Spires will now wait to attack you until you are in combat with the Spire Guardian. While you are in combat with the Spire Guardian, the spire can still attack you anywhere in the zone. Spires will have a protective shield around them and cannot be damaged until the Spire Guardian has been defeated. Death and loot persistence. When you die in an echo, all items in a small area around your corpse are brought with you to the echo of the world. Other improved end of time and monolithal visuals. Current corruption value for each timeline is now shown on the world map screen, so you don't have to enter each timeline to check its corruption level. Timeline completion quests. The last quest at 2020. These now reward significantly more experience, but have a limit based on the percent experience required for a character of that level to reach the next level. Echo objectives are no longer re-rolled each time you repeat an echo. Instead, they will always keep the same objective, even if exited and re-entered. Rustland's arena traps are now deactivated during the rest period between every 5 waves. Improve game performance in monoliths when there is a locate objective. Encounters in the Fall of Area quest echo have been simplified. Echo repeated entrance abuse prevention. Re-entering echoes that have been previously entered have a reduced amount of events, such as nemesis or exiled mages, and drop less loot.
This prevents us from having to drastically reduce the amount of content and rewards echoes contains, as leaving or re-entering them on purpose was emergent gameplay, and would be a very strong and unintuitive gameplay loop that we want to avoid. Added a message to echo tooltips that have previously been entered, noting that random mechanics will be less likely to occur. You can now respawn in dungeons by expending a key. You will respawn near the area where you died or just outside the boss area if you died while fighting a dungeon boss. During a dungeon boss fight, if you're in a party and all players have died, only one party member needs to spend a key for the party to respawn and continue. A spectate button has also been added to the death screen, allowing you to watch your party continue the fight while you are dead. You cannot move the camera while spectating. Completing Temporal Sanctum, Lightless Arbor, and Soulfire Bastion for the first time now rewards 2 passive points and 1 idle unlock, each by way of 3 new short quests for defeating their respective bosses. These quests also direct players to the alternate dungeon exit, which allows bypassing a portion of the campaign. Completing all 3 dungeons in this way will earn players a total of 6 passive points and 3 idle slots and skip a large portion of campaign zones.
Skill Changes section contains skill bug fixes as well, as some changes are relevant to bug fixes to the same skill. Time Rot's base damage is now 60 from 55. Time Rot, Doom, and Abyssal Decay now use different rules for being replaced when the afflicted character is at the maximum stacks of that ailment. They will only be replaced if the newly applied ailment would deal more damage than the remaining damage of an existing application of that ailment. For example, if you apply an Abyssal Decay that will deal 1000 total damage, since its stack limit is 1, any further attempts at applying Abyssal Decay will not apply the ailment unless the new ailment's total damage exceeds the remaining damage of that existing stack. So after 50% of that Abyssal Decay's remaining duration, it will have 500 damage left. So a new application will need to deal over 500 damage total to replace it. Instant cast abilities can be used immediately during evade. The player can use abilities after stun effect ends if the player was stunned during the evade. Movement has been made smoother for the game at more than 60 FPS. Evade is now smoother in online mode. Evade no longer stutters at the edges of the map. The evade animation no longer gets stuck if the skill is cast at the edge of an obstacle. Fixed an issue where mages could get stuck after the evade animation. Fixed an issue where the second cast of evade would break if clicked quickly. Fixed getting stuck in evade when used after skills such as teleport, transplant, and void cleave. Movement skills bug fixes. Doubled the max accessible path length for movement skills. This allows you to traverse over gaps that would take up to 60 units to walk around from 30. Fixed a bug where skills that make you immune during movement did not prevent damage dealt to ward. Fixed a bug causing some movement abilities to not adjust the character to the terrain. Fixed a bug where using a movement ability at the edge of a walkable area would sometimes cause the player to be moved in the opposite direction of where they aim.
Fixed cases where movement abilities can leave the player unable to move until another skill is used. Minions will now avoid targeting enemies that are currently invulnerable. Fixed a bug which caused many minions to not receive the inherent 50% less damage taken from powerful abilities. In particular, all Acolyte and Sentinel minions suffered from this bug. Minions bug fixes. Fixed a bug where minions sometimes won't show up next to the player despite the HUD displaying them being alive. The Sentinel class has been updated significantly with an aim of making the class more fun through many skill changes, and more powerful, and varied through new and updated passives, skill trees, a rework of Time Rot, and more. Passives. Sentinel passive tree. Forge Guard passive tree. Added a new Forge Guard node, Forge Master's Might, that allows you to equip a shield alongside a 2H sword, axe, mace, or spear. While you have a two-handed weapon and a shield equipped, you and your minions deal 20% less damage, and have 10% less attack and cast speed, and haste instead grants plus 10% block chance. Requires 45 points in the Forge Guard passive. Fearless grants 5% increased health regeneration per point, from 10%. Paladin passive tree. The first mastery bonus grants 1.5% more damage per 10% remaining health, from granting increased fire, lightning, and physical damage equal to your remaining health. Defiance now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 1 endurance threshold per 2% uncapped elemental resistance. Honor is renamed to Honor and grants plus 50 block effectiveness and plus 50 stun avoidance, from plus 40 block effect and plus 15 stun avoidance. And its non-scaling block chance is now a 3-point threshold bonus, but it grants plus 3% block chance from plus 2%. Phoenix Strike grants plus 12% ignite chance, from 12% melee ignite chance. And it now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 20% fire penetration with ignite. Divine Bolt is now a 4-point node from 1, and it grants a 25% chance to cast a Divine Bolt on melee hit per point, up to twice per second, from 20% chance on melee hit, no limit. Additionally, it now has a 3-point threshold bonus that grants an additional Divine Bolt projectile. Valor grants plus 12 health, from 15, and now also grants plus 2% endurance per point. Holy Symbol, in addition to healing you, now also grants 5 ward per second per point for 3 seconds, scaling with your increased healing effectiveness. Blinding Light now grants plus 7% blind chance per point, from 5%, and plus 7% electrified chance per point, but no longer grants plus 2% endurance. Additionally, it now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 25% increased blind and electrified duration. Heavenfire is now called Heaven's Boulder, and it now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 30% reduced bonus damage taken from crits. Rahaya's strength now grants plus 1% fire resistance shred chance for 2 points of strength, from 4% increased fire damage if you have hit an enemy with a melee attack recently. Shared Divinity is now a 6-point node that grants 10% more Divine Bolt damage per point, from plus 1 Divine Bolt projectiles and 10% reduced trigger chance. Additionally, it now has a 4-point threshold bonus that grants plus 1 Divine Bolt projectile. Holy Icon now also has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 7 health regeneration. Prayer has been removed, and it has been replaced with Force of Devotion. It grants plus 3 throwing damage per point, plus 10% throwing frailty chance per point, and plus 20% throwing armor shred chance per point. Piety has been reworked to a 6-point node that grants plus 3% lightning penetration per point, and plus 6% lightning resistance per point. And it now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 5% more damage to electrified enemies. Alignment has swapped places with Dedication, and it now grants 15% increased healing effect per point, from 30% increased healing effect to your next spell every 3 seconds. Additionally, this effect is doubled with spells that cost at least 10 mana. Dedication has swapped places with Alignment, and it now grants 1% increased maximum mana per point, and 2% increased mana range. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 1% increased mana regen for 1% block chance above 50%. Sanctuary Guardian grants 3% increased cast speed with the shield equipped complete, and plus 2 spell damage with the shield. And it also has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 15% to all resistances with the shield equipped. Sword of Rahai grants plus 20% melee Ignite chance per point, and plus 15% Ignite chance if you have cast a spell recently. Additionally, it has a 5-point bonus that causes all your current Ignite stacks on enemies to deal 50% more damage when you activate Holy Word. Faith Armor grants 8% increased armor per point, and 5%, and plus 2 health regen per point, and plus 5% critical hit. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 2% increased health regen per tune. Shield Wall is now a 4-point node from 1 point that grants plus 2% block chance per point, and plus 4%, and 4 health on block per point from 10, as well as 5% less stun duration on your per point. But as a less punishing downside than before, it gives you 30% less dodge chance when you cannot dodge. Holy Precision grants 10% increased crit chance per point, and 20% increased spell and throwing crit chance, and plus 5% crit multiplier per point, and plus 10% lightning crit multiplier. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 3% added crit chance. Penance now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 1% bleed duration with 20 endurance threshold. Righteous Firebrand is now a 5-point node from 7 that grants 2% increased melee attack speed per point and plus 1% fire penetration for 100% increased healing effectiveness per point. Prayer Aegis is now an 8-point node from 12 that grants plus 15 health per point from plus 12 and plus 5 endurance threshold per point from plus 6. Additionally, it now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 7 endurance threshold for 2 attunement. Added a new 8-point node called Judgment of the Storm that grants plus 5% shock chance per point, plus 5% lightning resistance shred chance per point, and plus 5% electrified chance per point. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 1% more lightning damage over time for 2% added crit multiplier above the base 200%.
The Divine Essence node has been reworked to grant plus 1 attunement per point, and a 10% chance per point to gain a Divine Essence each second while at high health. Each stack lasts 10 seconds, grants 15% increased armor and healing effect, and reduces damage over time taken by 5%. And it has 3 max stacks. Added a new 5-point node called Covenant of Light that grants 4% increased effect per point to Holy Aura of Symbols of Hope. Redemption's last stat line now grants 7% increased damage over time from per point the Penance buff, from 7% increased generic damage from the buff. Added a new 7-point Apex node behind Covenant of Light called Covenant of Dominion that grants 8% increased physical, fire and lightning damage per point, as well as 1% increased movement speed per point. Additionally, it causes your Holy Aura to grant 25% increased mana regeneration. Added a new 7-point Apex node behind Covenant of Light called Covenant of Protection that grants 8% increased armor per point, and 2% of your armor applies to damage over time taken per point. Additionally, it grants +5 health regeneration per Symbol of Hope. Void Knight passive tree. Temporal Corruption no longer converts Smite to Void. This effect is now available in Smite skill tree. Devouring Blade now grants 5% increased damage per point, from 10% increased damage for 4 seconds if you have killed an enemy recently, and plus 0.1% leech per point. These effects are doubled if you have killed any enemy recently. World Eater now requires 1 point in Devouring Blade, grants plus 0.5% of melee and Void Leech per point, from plus 1%. Additionally, it now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 20% increased health leech rate. Abyssal Endurance now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 5% less void and physical damage taken. Temporal Corruption no longer has Smite conversion, as it has been moved to Smite skill tree. Sorrow and Steel now grants 8% increased melee damage per point, from 7% increased physical and void damage. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 25% area to melee area skills. Void Blades grants plus 3 melee void damage per point from plus 2. Void Corruption is now an 8-point node that grants 10% increased crit chance per point, and the plus 1% crit multiplier per point in the Void Knight tree is now a 5-point threshold bonus. Dark Maw now also grants 2% increased health per point. Void Bolts is now called Void Waves, so it isn't confused with the new Void Bolt sub-ability. It grants plus 3 throwing void damage per point, from plus 2, and 10% increased spell void damage per point, from plus 2 spell void damage. Unending Hunger now grants plus 0.2% melee leech per point, from plus 1% more health absorbed from Dark Maw, and 10% increased leech rate. Future Strike has been removed. Void Flux has been removed. Added a new 10-point node in Future Strike's place that grants 7% increased spell damage and 3% increased area for area spells. Additionally, it has an 8-point threshold bonus that grants Abyssal Echoes plus 15% chance to echo. Doom Knight grants plus 6 health per point from plus 5. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 5% more armor. Finality grants 8% increased melee void damage per point, from 5%. Patient Doom is now a 6-point node from 5, that grants 8% increased void damage over time per point, from 30% increased damage to next attack every 3 seconds, and 5% reduced bonus damage taken from critical strikes per point. Rot Ripples now also grants plus 10% time rot chance per point. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 25% increased time rot duration. Null Velocity has been reworked to Temporal Velocity and is an 8 node. It grants plus 1 vitality per point and 3% increased cooldown recovery speed per point. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that causes your Devouring Orb to immediately cast a Void Rift on direct use. Woe is now an 8-point node from 12 that grants plus 3% physical and void penetration per point, but no longer grants 7% increased melee damage and 5% increased void damage and armor for 4 seconds on kill. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants plus 50% frailty and slow chance. Rot Grip has switched places with Woe. It grants plus 6% time rot chance per point, from plus 10%. Additionally, each point grants 0.2% more time rot damage per point for 1% global slow chance, 0.4% more time rot damage per point per 1% global time rot chance with void skills, and 0.2% more time rot damage per point per 1% increased melee attack, throwing or cast speed, whichever is the lowest. Maximum of 5 points. Renouncement is now an 8-point node, from 5. that grants 3% increased cast speed per point, and a 5% chance per point to cast a void beam on direct smite casts, up to 2 times per 2 seconds. Additionally, the previous smite scales with vitality instead of attunement smite, and deals +1 void spell damage per vitality, have been moved to a 5-point threshold bonus. Essence of the End grants 12% chance per point to gain a void essence on kill, from 4%, and 4% chance to gain a void essence when hitting a boss or rare enemy. You can gain 1 void essence every 4 seconds this way. Additionally, void essences now grant 3% more void and melee damage, and 15% reduced stun duration on you, from 15% increased void and melee damage, and 10% reduced stun duration on you. That singular purpose is now a 5-point node from 4. That grants 2% more void damage per point, from 25% increased void damage, doubled if you have less than 30% block chance. Additionally, it has a 4-point threshold bonus that grants 5% less damage taken from slowed and time-rotting enemies. D-stack. Future Mind is now an 8-point node from 10. It grants 4% increased mana regen per point from 2%. Additionally, it has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 14 mana whenever an ability echoes. This effect has an 8-second cooldown. Echoing Strikes now also grants +4% time rot chance per point. Additionally, it has a 4-point threshold bonus that grants +50% time rot chance for your echoed abilities. Void Aegis has been reworked. If you take a hit that deals at least 25% of your maximum health as damage, you sacrifice a Void Essence to gain Void Aegis for 4 seconds, which grants you 3% of your maximum health gained as endurance threshold per point. Dread has been renamed to Dread Form, and it now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants 50% reduced slow and chill effect on you. Time Legion now also grants 3% increased throwing attack speed per point, but no longer grants time rot chance. Added a new 5-point node called Abyssal Fluctuation that grants 10% of elemental damage taken as void per point, but you take 4% less void damage per point. Added a new 5-point node called Mortal Cleave that grants +1% added crit chance per point.